So let's say, sorry, no, go backwards. Sorry. So differences within Africa, within sub-Saharan Africa or even North Africa. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Resources. That's right. I don't know why it's okay. Sorry. Let me just go fully tablet here. See if that works. Hold on a sec. Okay. There we go. Okay. I'm getting myself in trouble here. It was all working pretty well. Here we go. So resources. Okay. So that's very important. The Nigerian economy is very different than the Kenyan economy, and the reason, big part of the reason why is Nigeria has tons of oil. There's some really interesting cases of countries that just in recent years have made big resource finds, like Ghana, and this question looms over policy debates in Ghana. Are we going to become like Nigeria? Are we going to become corrupt, and are all of our good institutions going to kind of break down under the weight of this oil? Yeah. Yeah. More of a comparative perspective. Yeah. So these are all tremendous. Let me get one more right there. Yeah. Yep. So urbanization, and then the whole issue, and this is the gap I thought people were going to get onto first, and I definitely see the issue of sustainability, environment, and development is just a huge issue, which we're going to touch on, but it doesn't have its own sort of week or two in the course. So let's just say sustainability. I'm going to pop this up again. I'm going to try to make it work. Sorry. Apologize. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not doing this on purpose. Even though I do like looking at my kids. But hold on. Okay, got it. But see, now my screen is sideways. Okay. I apologize, guys. I promise on Thursday I'll get this figured out. Hold on. It's flipping on my screen, not on yours, which is good, because now it's right side up on my screen. Hold on. I apologize. Good. Got it. So you guys have raised a lot of good issues. The one thing I'll say about these topics is a number of them are going to come up in the course. There isn't a particular week devoted to microfinance, for instance, but when we talk about economic and climate shocks in rural households, we're inevitably going to be talking about credit, finance, and sort of different microinsurance options that households have. So that's one topic we'll get to. When we talk about health, there's certain environmental aspects of health that we'll get to. And in this whole discussion at the end of the course, there's going to be a lot of policy, there's going to be a lot of discussion about the role of foreign powers, the role of donors. And so again, even though there isn't a separate week, it's a topic that's going to sort of weave through. At the same time, I think any of these topics could be a course in their own right. We could have a course on urbanization in Africa. That's a fascinating topic. Africa's urbanizing rapidly, and there's a lot of interesting recent research on the topic. Same thing around environment and development, et cetera. So because we only have 27 lectures, we're not going to be able to cover everything we want to, although I'm going to try to weave in some of these topics along the way. And when you have a question that relates to one of these themes, bring it up. Let's bring that into the discussion in class, and potentially I can even point you to some readings that aren't on the syllabus, but are relevant for that topic. Okay. So this is the layout of the course. There really are these two halves, and we're going to cover a lot of ground as much as we can, realistically, in one term. What about the methods we're going to use? I talked about the importance of applied econometric methods. There really are 5 or 6 different techniques or approaches that we're going to use. The first is just OLS regression. All of you should know what OLS regression is, or linear regression. You should learn that in statistics or econometrics. There'll be a brief review of that in section and in the econometric appendix. That's one of the readings. Then we're going to turn to a number of weeks discussing randomized controlled trials. So randomized trials have historically been done a lot in medicine. Everybody's probably familiar with clinical trials, where one group of patients gets a new drug, the other group gets the old drug or gets a placebo, and then you compare the health outcomes of those two groups to try to understand which drug is better or which approach is better. That's an idea that's been around for decades in medical research, but just in the last decade or 15 years has started becoming common in social science research. And now it is very common in social science research. It turns out that a lot of the early randomized controlled trials in all the social sciences were done in development economics in Africa. And we're going to talk about some of them. So there was a lot of early work in this area in health, in education, on governance in Africa. And this is a tool and a technique that is very useful. A lot of NGOs, a lot of donors, a ton of governments are doing randomized controlled trials today that didn't do them 5 years ago and hadn't even heard of them 10 years ago. Didn't even know it was a possibility to use these kinds of approaches. So we're going to study these methods, we're going to study the econometrics, and we're going to see the applications of these methods in real projects. Now, randomized controlled trials are often called the gold standard methodology, even though they have many limitations, which we're going to discuss. There are a lot of other methodologies that also have strengths, though. And in many real-world cases with particular data, in a particular program context, you don't have a randomized controlled trial. You didn't do one, you couldn't do one, for whatever reason there isn't one. There are other good applied econometric tools you can use to understand the impact of particular programs and projects. And we'll discuss them. One of them is difference and differences analysis. This is analysis that uses data at multiple points in time across multiple people in order to study impacts. Basically looking at the changes in particular individuals over time. That's difference and differences. Excuse me. We're going to talk about regression discontinuity designs in a lot of detail. These are approaches that use the fact that there's a sharp cutoff or threshold in a program to study impacts. So imagine to get admitted to a particular university in Kenya, you need to get at least an 87 on an exam. I'm just making up a number. If you get an 87 or higher, you get admitted. If you get an 86, you don't get admitted. You can compare the people that got the 86 to the people who got the 87 to study the impact of getting admitted to that college. That's the basic idea. But basically, you can use sharp cutoffs to try to approximate an experiment. We'll talk about instrumental variables approaches. The intuition behind instrumental variables are similar often to the intuition behind randomized controlled trials. And we'll also talk about pre-analysis plans, which are not a statistical tool per se, but pre-analysis plans are an approach you can use to have a more rigorous research design. And you may say, what is he talking about? Well, we'll get to it. I think once we go through these other methods and we talk about the application of pre-analysis plans, they'll make more sense. The basic idea behind a pre-analysis plan is before you touch your data, you publicly register the hypotheses you're going to ask. so that people know when you report results, they were what you wanted to test before you got your hands on the data, and they're not just the result of data mining or messing around with the data. That's the idea behind pre-analysis plan. So we're going to talk about each of these in detail. Pierre and Jonas are going to talk about each of these in detail in section, and you are going to master, hopefully, these methods. So when you see a certain project or a certain data set, you're going to know, based on the characteristics of that data or that setting, exactly which of these approaches to use and then how to do them, because in problem sets, you're actually going to give you data and ask you to run this analysis. Okay, so you don't need fancy econometrics to do this. You just need to know basic linear regression. It's really more of a conceptual question in this course. We're going to understand conceptually when you can use these tools, when they make sense and when they don't. Using certain tools and not others is sometimes more art than science. There's a certain settings where they make more sense intellectually, and we're going to talk about those issues. So this is going to be a little different. This is going to be a lot different than your typical econometrics class. This is going to be about using tools, understanding the real-world settings to use tools, and we're going to have some equations, but the idea is to be light on the equations and heavy on the concepts. That's the hope. Okay. Beyond those econometric methods, we're going to focus on several conceptual and theoretical frameworks. I talked about economic growth models. We're going to talk about those next week. We're going to talk about externalities and public goods, which is a public economics theoretical concept that's very important. We're going to talk about how to apply the idea of externalities, and we're also going to have models with expected utility maximization, which I think a lot of you may be familiar with from micro, but if not, we'll walk through it. So these are basically models that we'll go through, or conceptual approaches we'll go through. We're also going to use a lot of different types of data in the course. You're going to see different types of data in the papers. Some of it is original field data collection, researchers going and designing their own data collection in the context of field experiments. A lot of the papers will have that flavor, and we'll talk about what it means to be good data and bad data, what data we can trust. We'll talk about the use of spatial data in a couple of cases. Spatial data is being used more and more in social science. It's incredibly important to understand it and understand how to use it. We'll talk about forensic data techniques. Forensic data techniques are when you can use data to detect something illegal or illicit. You can sometimes look at regular administrative data, and because of the patterns in the data, detect corruption or detect certain types of behavior. We'll talk about when you can do that. And finally, towards the end of the course, we'll talk about some really unique historical data sets that have been assembled. So, again, the goal here is not just to teach you about particular data sets, although you will learn about particular data sets, but to be a sophisticated consumer of data, user of data, to really understand when data is good quality and not. To have meaningful analysis, if we really want to tackle the issue of why Africa is poor and we want to make a dent in that problem, we have to do good research. And to do good research, we need to use the right methods with the right data. If either of those two things fall apart, it's not going to, whatever we're doing is not going to be very reliable. So we're going to try to give you guys a foundation to understand what the good methods are, what good data is, so we can make progress on this issue. That's the goal. Let me pause. Are there any questions on the methods, the data? Okay. Oh, questions. That was my next slide. Great. Okay, if no questions, then in the last half hour, I'd actually like to start kind of getting into some of the material. So what I want to do today and next time is talk about broad global patterns. There are four major less developed regions. There's sort of the fifth one too, but East Asia, Latin America, South Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa. The sort of fifth region would be Middle East and North Africa, which in the World Bank abbreviations is MENA. The World Bank has the best abbreviations, if nothing else. Sub-Saharan Africa. So there's 4 to 5. But the 4 with greatest population are East Asia, Latin America, South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa. And of those 4, and of the 5th, if you count Middle East and North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa has by far had the worst economic performance over the last 40 years on almost every dimension. That's the starting point for this course. This is a region that has not had rapid economic growth until very recently, as we'll talk about, has not had improved life expectancy, and while there have been gains in some other measures, they've been slow. So we want to understand why. We want to understand what we can do about it, what types of policies do seem to be most effective at improving economic outcomes. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we want to learn the tools we can use to ask and answer the next question. So we're going to read some papers, and I'm going to give you some discussion here, and we're going to discuss some papers that have some early answers on what to do. But if you guys have the tools, you can do better next time. You can answer 100 more questions, and we can all make progress together. Okay, so why are we studying Africa? It is the poorest and least developed continent, as I mentioned. Less well known is the fact that in the coming decades, it's also going to become the world's most populous region. And I'll have more to say about that on Thursday. So the world's demographics are changing very rapidly, and Sub-Saharan Africa is a very rapidly growing share of the world's population. Okay. So here's a world map. You guys can see the usual patterns. This is a little bit different than most maps, though, because it's an equal area map. The size of countries on this map represents their true geographic area. So it's very hard to take a globe, like the Earth, and squish it to be flat. And when you do that, things get a little distorted. So in the traditional map that we usually see, what ends up happening is the areas near the North and the South Pole get flattened out. I think you guys all know this, and they look really big. So Greenland or Canada look like these massive continents on the maps we're used to, but they're really small relative to other parts of the world. This is an equal area map. You can see right away that area-wise, Africa is huge. Sub-Saharan Africa is much bigger than North America, much bigger than Western Europe or all of Europe. So geographically speaking, Sub-Saharan Africa is massive, and this gives you a sense of it. South America is really big too. Again, areas near the tropics are actually a lot bigger than we think of in our traditional maps. Brazil is huge, bigger than we usually think. And the U.S. is pretty big, but it doesn't look quite as imposing as the maps we all saw in elementary school, because those were distorted to make the northern latitudes look really big. Surprise, surprise, we know who was coming from those far northern latitudes. So here's a map of the African continent, and kind of zoomed in. There's 40-something African countries. The newest country you can see right there is South Sudan. South Sudan is only a couple of years old, and it broke away from Sudan. We are going to focus, for the most part, in this course on Africa south of the Sahara. There's a number of reasons we do that. One, the existing research literature, policy literature makes this distinction. They make a distinction between Sub-Saharan Africa versus North Africa and Middle East. And they largely do it because of the perceived cultural affinities between North Africa and the Middle East, linguistically, they're Arabic-speaking regions, in terms of religion, et cetera. And Sub-Saharan Africa has a distinct history, has a distinct colonial history, had a different experience with the slave trade, et cetera. So there are a number of cultural, historical, and linguistic reasons why we might make this distinction. Now, the countries that are bisected by that red line are often harder to classify. There are certain populations in those countries that look north, others that look south, culturally or historically. For the most part, the countries that are bisected by that line, we are going to consider in Sub-Saharan Africa. So that's going to be our focus. At certain points, we will make links to North Africa, but it's not going to be the main focus of the course. And as you'll see, we have our hands full studying sub-Saharan Africa. Another big distinction between North Africa and sub-Saharan Africa is economic. So if you actually look at average income levels in North Africa, they're often an order of magnitude higher. Incomes are much higher than they are in sub-Saharan Africa. So they're economically quite distinct regions as well. Okay. What I want to do now is, before we get into the details, I'm going to put up some figures. We're going to talk about numbers. I want to just pause for a second and read you just a very short article. We can read it together. That just reminds us why we're here. For a lot of the course, we're going to talk about poverty as this kind of abstract thing. Just later on in this lecture, I'm going to put up statistics, 42.1, 53.7, et cetera. But what I want to do before we get into that is think of the human dimension of poverty in Africa, the human dimension of development, to make it real and make it concrete for us. So this is just a story that ran in a British newspaper, just kind of a descriptive story. And the reason I like it is it just tells the story of one woman's day in Eritrea. It's just her day, just cataloging what she's doing during the day. I want us all to read through this. Can you guys read the font? Is it big enough to read? I want us all to read through it quietly and think about the links to some of those topics on the syllabus. And again, this is just one woman's day starting at 4 a.m. And the woman's name is Leten Kiel. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that correctly. So maybe let's just take a minute and read it together. When you're done reading this page, there's just a couple more short pages. Just raise your hand for a sec. And when enough people raise their hand, I'll advance to the next page. Oh, sorry. Can I go to the next page? Okay, let's keep going. Next page. That's the last page. Goes through the page. Okay. So what are some topics in the course that come up even in that very brief description of the day, of key issues? Yeah. So she mentions there being an HIV clinic. That's something that's present in the area. Yep. Yeah, exactly. So it's a very long walk to school. It's expensive. They can only afford to send one child. So access to, oh, come on. I just thought I had this thing figured out. So access to education. Yeah. Yeah, there's all these upper respiratory infections probably. So basically, oh man, sorry. I'll get this sorted out by Thursday. So health problems, maybe infectious disease if it's some respiratory infection. Yeah. What's that? Yeah, exactly. Like a whole day, every minute is work of some kind just to survive, right? So there's just tremendous, the work hours are very long, and they link back to health. If you're working all the time, if you can't rest to heal. So that's another issue. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So there's a line there. If the rains come, if the rains even come. So there's this kind of climate dependence, you could say, and certainly uncertainty. That seems very important. Yep. Yep. Oh. Yeah. So clean water. So it's another environmental issue. I'm sorry. You guys are going to lose patience with me very soon. This thing. Clean water. Yeah.